My own father told me I was old enough to handle it on my own, then walked away with his new wife. You're old enough to figure it out, my own father told me, then turned his back and walked away with his new wife and her kids. I sat on that cold bench for what felt like an eternity before I finally called my grandmother. Hours later she arrived, not alone, but with a team of lawyers. When he finally returned from his lavish trip, he found his bank accounts frozen and his house completely empty. My name is Mia, and I was just 14 when my father dropped me off at Central Station, left me sitting alone on a cold metal bench with nothing but a worn backpack and $20, then drove off with his new family. For 6 agonizing hours I waited, convinced he'd come back. I watched trains pull out, bound for places I couldn't possibly reach, all while he was posting pictures from a luxury resort, toasting the ones who matter most. He genuinely believed he was getting rid of a burden, never realizing that the grandmother he'd forbidden me from seeing was worth $80 million, or that the worthless daughter he abandoned was about to inherit $10 million at 18. What truly haunts him from his prison cell isn't the money he lost or his 18-year sentence. It's the knowledge that his ultimate betrayal was what finally set me free. In Dad's car, the silence had always been heavy, thick with unspoken words. But today it felt like trying to breathe through wet wool. I pressed my forehead against the cool passenger window, watching the familiar streets of our neighborhood blur past. I didn't know then that I was seeing them for the very last time. My worn backpack sat between my feet, packed with the few essentials for what Dad had vaguely called a little trip to sort things out. Dad, are we going to be back before Monday? I asked, trying to break the heavy silence that had stretched between us since he picked me up from Mom's apartment that morning. I have that history presentation. Remember, the one about the Civil War I've been working on for weeks? His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. You'll figure it out, Mia. A cold dread slithered down my spine at his tone. This wasn't the dad who used to help me with school projects, who'd stay up until midnight cutting out cardboard pieces for my third-grade solar system model. This was the stranger he'd become since marrying Sharon 6 months ago. But Dad, please just stop talking for a minute. Okay. I need to think. I swallowed hard, tasting the bitter coffee I grabbed at Mom's before he arrived. She'd been passed out on the couch again, empty wine bottles creating a glass city on the coffee table. Dad had looked at her with such disgust when he'd come to get me, muttering something about no wonder under his breath. The train station loomed ahead, its red brick facade and clock tower looking like something out of an old movie. Dad pulled into the drop-off zone, not even bothering with the parking lot. My stomach twisted. Aren't you coming in with me? I asked as he popped the trunk. He was already out of the car, yanking my backpack from the back with unnecessary force. I scrambled to follow, my legs feeling shaky on the pavement. The November wind sliced through my thin jacket, the same one Sharon had said made me look homeless at Thanksgiving dinner. Here, Dad said, shoving the backpack at me. His eyes kept darting toward the station entrance, then to his watch. You're 14, Mia, old enough to figure things out. Figure what out? Dad, you haven't even told me where I'm going. Or. That's when I saw them. Sharon stood just inside the glass doors of the station, her perfectly manicured hand resting on her daughter Brittany's shoulder. Brittany, 12 years old and blonde like her mother, wore the kind of designer coat I'd only ever seen in store windows and never dared to dream about. Sharon's 8-year-old son Connor was absorbed in a game on his phone, oblivious to everything. Sharon caught my eye and smiled. That cold, triumphant smile I'd seen her practice in mirrors when she thought no one was looking. Dad. My voice came out small, fragile. He was already walking toward them, not looking back. His hand found Sharon's waist, pulling her close as he kissed her cheek. Connor looked up from his game long enough for Dad to ruffle his hair affectionately, the way he used to ruffle mine. Dad. I called louder, panic rising in my throat like floodwaters. Dad, you haven't given me a ticket. Or money, Dad. An elderly woman pulling a suitcase gave me a concerned look. A businessman in a gray suit stepped around me, irritation clear in his body language. But Dad didn't turn around. He guided his new family toward the exit, Brittany glancing back at me once with something that might have been pity or might have been satisfaction. Then they were gone. I stood frozen in the middle of the busy station, my backpack weighing down my shoulders, staring at the spot where they disappeared. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Any second now Dad would come back through those doors, laughing about what a terrible joke this had been. Any second now. But the seconds stretched into minutes. 5, 10, 20. A station guard, his uniform neat and pressed, approached me with measured steps. Young lady, are you waiting for someone? My dad, I said automatically. He forgot something. He'll be right back. The guard's eyes, brown and kind behind wire-rimmed glasses, took in my backpack, my panicked expression, the way I kept staring at the door. Would you like to sit down while you wait? There are benches over there. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and made my way to a cold metal bench near the ticket windows. The backpack slumped beside me as I sat, and I finally looked inside it properly. One change of clothes, my phone charger, a hairbrush, the history textbook for my presentation, and a crumpled $20 bill in the front pocket that I'd been saving from babysitting jobs. $20. That was all I had. The station bustled around me. Families reuniting. Business people rushing to catch trains. Teenagers laughing in groups. Everyone had somewhere to go. Someone expecting them. Everyone except me. My phone cracked from when I dropped it last month and Dad had said it wasn't worth fixing. Showed 3:47 p.m. I scrolled through my contacts. Each name a small disappointment. Mom would be drunk until at least tomorrow. My best friend Emma was on vacation in Florida with her family. The other kids from school? We weren't close enough for me to call crying from a train station. Then I saw it. A contact I'd almost deleted a dozen times but never quite could. Grandma Helen. Dad's mother. The woman he'd cut off 2 years ago after some fight about money and meddling that I'd never fully understood. The grandmother who used to bake me cookies from scratch and teach me card games on rainy Saturdays before everything fell apart. My stomach rumbled, reminding me I'd skipped lunch, too nervous about this mysterious trip to eat. I unwrapped the granola bar I'd found in my backpack side pocket, probably from last week's school field trip, and ate it slowly, making it last. 4:15 p.m. The early darkness of November was already creeping in through the high windows. The station would close at midnight. Then what? Where would I go? The thought of spending the night on the streets made me feel like I might throw up the granola bar. A family walked past. Mother, father, 3 kids, all holding hands in a chain. The youngest, maybe 5, was crying about being tired. Her father scooped her up, settling her on his shoulders, and she giggled through her tears. That's when I broke. The tears came silently at first, just hot tracks down my cheeks that I quickly wiped away. But then my chest heaved and a sob escaped. I pulled my knees up to my chest, making myself as small as possible on the bench, and cried into my jeans. Miss. A gentle voice. Miss, are you all right? I looked up to find an elderly woman, perhaps 70, wearing a purple coat and holding a cup of coffee from the station cafe. She sat down beside me without invitation, close enough to be comforting, but not so close as to be intrusive. My dad left me, I heard myself say. He just left me here. Her face hardened. How old are you, sweetheart? 16. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling the police. No. I grabbed her hand, surprising both of us. Please. First, I have someone I can call. My grandmother. I haven't talked to her in a while. The woman studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Call her. Now while I sit here with you. With shaking fingers, I found Grandma Helen's number again. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up when, hello. Her voice was exactly as I remembered. Firm but warm, like aged whiskey and velvet combined. Grandma, my voice cracked. It's Mia. A sharp intake of breath. Mia, sweetheart, what's wrong? Where are you? Dad left me at the train station. He drove away with Sharon and her kids. And he left me here with no money and no ticket. And I don't know what to do. Stop. Her voice cut through my panic like a knife through butter. Which train station? Central Station. Downtown. Are you safe right now? Is anyone bothering you? No, there's a nice lady sitting with me. Good. You stay right there. Don't move. Don't go with anyone. I'm coming to get you. But Grandma, it's at least 2 hours. I'll be there in 90 minutes. I'm bringing some friends with me. Legal friends. You just stay put and stay safe. Can you do that for me? Yes. And Mia, this is not your fault. Whatever that bastard, whatever your father told you, this is not your fault. The line went dead. The woman in purple was still beside me, and she squeezed my shoulder gently. Your grandmother? I nodded. Good. Home. The word felt strange in my mind. I hadn't been to Grandma's house since before the fight with Dad. I remembered it as a modest 2-story in the suburbs with a garden she tended religiously and a kitchen that always smelled like something baking. But we weren't heading toward the suburbs. The car glided through parts of the city I'd only seen from bus windows. Tree-lined streets with historic mansions set back from the road, their windows glowing warmly in the darkness. Grandma, where are we going? Home, she repeated, but there was something in her voice, a note of satisfaction, maybe even vindication. The car turned through a set of iron gates that opened automatically, motion sensors detecting our approach. The driveway curved through manicured grounds lit by subtle landscape lighting. And then the house. No, the estate came into view. What is this place? I breathed. This is where I live now, Grandma said simply. There are things about your family, about our family, that your father never wanted you to know. The house was 3 stories of brick and stone, with tall windows and a circular driveway dominated by a fountain. It looked like something from a movie about old money and secret societies. Mr. Chin helped us out of the car. I'll have the preliminary paperwork ready by morning, Mrs. Hartley. The emergency custody filing is already in process. Thank you, James. We'll speak at breakfast. Inside, the house was even more overwhelming. Marble floors, a sweeping staircase, art on the walls that looked like it belonged in museums. A woman in a crisp uniform appeared immediately. Mrs. Hartley, welcome home. Shall I prepare the blue room for Miss Mia? Yes, Rosa. And please have dinner sent to the family dining room in 30 minutes. Something comforting. Perhaps your excellent chicken soup. Of course, ma'am. Grandma led me through the house to a smaller dining room, though smaller here still meant a table for 8 and a chandelier that cast rainbow patterns on the walls. She poured herself a glass of wine and me a glass of what turned out to be fresh squeezed orange juice. I imagine you have questions, she said, sitting across from me. This isn't the house I remember. No, that was the house I moved to after your grandfather died, when I was pretending to be someone I'm not. Trying to be small enough, poor enough that your father wouldn't feel threatened. She took a sip of wine. It didn't work. He still cut me off the moment I questioned his choices. But how all of this? Your grandfather, my husband, was not the simple insurance salesman your father told you he was. Robert built his company from nothing, turned it into an empire. When he died 5 years ago, he left everything in a very specific trust structure, one that your father has been trying to break ever since. Rosa appeared with bowls of soup that smelled like heaven and warm bread that was still steaming. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until I started eating. Your father received his inheritance immediately, Grandma continued. $5 million free and clear. It should have been enough to set him up for life, to provide for you, to build something meaningful. $5 million? I nearly choked on my soup. Instead, he spent it. Bad investments trying to impress people like Sharon and her country club friends, living beyond even those substantial means. When the money ran out, he came to me demanding more, demanding access to the rest of the trust. The rest? Your grandfather was worth approximately $80 million when he died. The majority of it is in trust. Some for me, some for charities, and a significant portion $10 million for you. To be accessed when you turn 18 or earlier under certain circumstances, your education for instance. Or if you were ever abandoned or endangered by your legal guardians. Dad knows about this? Oh yes. He's known since the will was read. He spent 3 years trying to get power of attorney over your trust, trying to convince judges that I'm senile, that the money would be better managed by him. Her smile was sharp. He never expected me to fight back. Never expected me to have kept such careful records of his attempts. Is that why he cut you off? Because you wouldn't give him my money? Partially, but also because I started asking questions about you. Whether you were being properly cared for. Whether the money he claimed to need for your expenses was actually being spent on you. She reached across the table to take my hand. I hired a private investigator 6 months ago when he stopped letting me see you. I knew about Sharon before their wedding was announced. I knew about the debts he was hiding. I knew he'd been fired from his job and was pretending to go to work every day. She squeezed my hand. What I didn't know, what I never imagined, was that he would abandon you like this. After dinner, she led me upstairs to the blue room. It was 3 times the size of my bedroom at Mom's apartment, with its own bathroom and a window seat overlooking the gardens. Fresh pajamas were laid out on the bed, somehow in my size. Rosa has a talent for these things, Grandma said, seeing my surprise. There are more clothes in the closet. We'll go shopping properly tomorrow. Grandma, I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me any of this before? She sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly looking every one of her 70-some years. It was 3 years. Your father forbade it. And as long as he had custody, I had to be careful. Any wrong move and he would have disappeared with you entirely. I've been waiting, gathering evidence, preparing for the day he made a mistake big enough that no court would side with him. Her eyes hardened. I just never thought his mistake would be this cruel. She pulled an envelope from her pocket, aged and yellowed at the edges. This is for you. Your grandfather wrote it before he died, with instructions that you should receive it when you were old enough to understand. My name was written on the front in shaky handwriting. Inside, the letter was dated just a month before he died. My dearest Mia, it began. If you are reading this, then you are old enough to understand that family is complicated, that love and money can become tangled in ugly ways, and that sometimes the people who should protect us become the ones we need protection from. I am not long for this world, but I go knowing that I have done what I can to secure your future. The money I've left for you is not just currency. It's freedom. Freedom to pursue your education without debt. Freedom to take risks in your career. Freedom to leave situations that don't serve you. Your father is my son, and I love him, but I know his weaknesses. I've watched him mistake wealth for worth. But I couldn't sleep. I sat in the window seat, looking out at the gardens lit by moonlight, my mind racing. Everything I believed about my family, about our situation, had been a lie. We weren't struggling. Dad wasn't a victim of bad luck. He'd had everything and thrown it away. And now he'd thrown me away too. My phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. Against my better judgment, I opened it. There they were. Dad, Sharon, Brittany, and Connor. All smiles at what looked like a resort restaurant. The caption. Family vacation. Making memories with the ones who matter most. Red heart. Posted an hour ago. While I'd been sitting in a train station terrified and alone. He'd been raising a champagne glass with his new family. The ones who matter most. I screamed. A guttural sound I barely recognized as my own. Then I turned off my phone and finally cried. Not tears of fear or abandonment this time, but tears of rage. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of lawyers, tutors, and transformation. Grandma had assembled what she called the team. Not just legal counsel, but an entire support system designed to rebuild what my father had broken. Posture, Miss Catherine corrected, her hand gentle but firm on my shoulder. You've been making yourself small for so long. You've forgotten how to take up space. The etiquette and confidence coach had been Grandma's idea. Not to change who you are, she'd assured me, but to give you tools. The world we're about to enter: courtrooms, legal depositions, possibly media attention. It's a game with rules. I want you to know those rules so you can choose when to follow them and when to break them. Miss Catherine was teaching me how to sit in a chair like I deserved to be there. How to make eye contact without flinching. How to speak so people had to listen. It felt like learning a new language, one where my body said as much as my words. Better, she said as I walked across the room again, this time with my shoulders back. Remember, you're not trying to be someone else. You're uncovering who you've always been under the fear. In the afternoons, I met with Dr. Reeves, a therapist who specialized in adolescent trauma. His office was in the east wing of the house, set up specifically for these sessions. I don't want you to think I'm weak, I told him during our third session. Needing help isn't weakness, Mia. Your father abandoned you at a train station. Most adults would struggle to cope with that betrayal. The fact that you're here working through it shows incredible strength. I still dream about the station, I admitted. About waiting for him to come back. Do you want him to come back in the dreams? I thought about it. No. I want him to see me not needing him to come back. Dr. Reeves smiled slightly. That's a powerful shift in perspective. The legal preparation was the hardest part. Mr. Chin and his team had commandeered what Grandma called the war room. A conference room on the first floor where boxes of documents covered every surface. Financial records, emails, text messages, even social media posts. This is from 3 months ago. Ms. Rodriguez, one of the younger lawyers, showed me a printed email exchange. Your father explicitly told your mother he was taking full custody because, and I quote, the kid is worth 10 million at 18 and I'm not letting that slip away. The kid. Not even my name. Can we use this? I asked. Oh yes, Mr. Chin said with satisfaction. This establishes clear financial motive for seeking custody, combined with the abandonment. It's a slam dunk. Ms. Rodriguez finished. But it wasn't just about building our case. I want you to understand every aspect of what's happening. Grandma insisted one evening as we reviewed financial statements. Knowledge is power. Your father kept you ignorant because ignorance made you vulnerable. Never again. So I learned about trust funds and fiduciary duty, about custody law and financial fraud. I learned that my father had taken out credit cards in my name when I was 12, running up debt that Grandma's lawyers were now having to untangle. I learned that he'd been telling people for months that I was troubled and difficult, laying groundwork for some plan I didn't yet understand. He was going to have me declared incompetent, wasn't he? I asked Mr. Chin one afternoon. When I turned 18, he was going to try to get permanent control of my trust. Mr. Chin and Grandma exchanged glances. We believe so, yes, he said carefully. The rage that had been simmering since that night at the station bubbled up again. He was going to destroy my entire life for money. Money he'd already proven he couldn't manage responsibly, Grandma added. The 10 million would have been gone within 2 years if his spending patterns held. 3 weeks after the abandonment, we got word that Dad had been served with papers while at the resort. Someone had recorded it. His face going from smug dismissal to genuine shock as he read the documents, then throwing them on the ground and shouting at the process server about harassment and bitter old women who can't mind their own business. The video went viral within hours. Good, Grandma said, watching it with grim satisfaction. Let everyone see who he really is. The court date was set for the following month. Dad hired an expensive legal team, probably borrowing against future expectations or convincing Sharon to invest in his defense. His lawyers filed a countermotion claiming Grandma had kidnapped me and was manipulating a vulnerable child. Let them come, Mr. Chin said confidently. We have everything documented, including the security footage from the train station. There's footage. I hadn't known. Oh yes, crystal clear. Him walking away while you call after him. You sitting alone for hours. Very compelling evidence. But Dad wasn't going down without a fight. He started a campaign of his own, calling extended family members with his version of events. According to him, I had been out of control, violent towards Sharon's children, and he'd simply been taking me to a therapeutic boarding school when I'd run away at the station. Some relatives believed him, others didn't. The family fractured into camps, and my phone filled with messages ranging from support to condemnation. Block them all, Grandma advised. Their opinions don't matter. Only the truth matters. But the truth was becoming a weapon of its own. Ms. Rodriguez discovered that Sharon's first husband had filed similar complaints about financial manipulation when they divorced. Dad's business partners came forward with stories of unpaid loans and broken contracts. Even Brittany's teacher reached out, concerned about behavioral changes since the marriage and willing to testify about bruises she'd noticed. He's not just a bad father, I said one night, reading through the accumulated evidence. He's a bad person. Yes, Grandma said simply. And it's time the world knew it. The local news picked up the story first. Abandoned teen fights back against father's betrayal. Then the national outlets. My name was kept out of it, minor protection laws, but Dad's wasn't. Neither was Sharon's. Their perfect family image crumbled in real time. Sharon's country club friends distanced themselves. The private school questioned whether Brittany and Connor should continue attending. The resort where they'd been celebrating while I sat abandoned actually banned them from returning. Dad tried to call me once 2 days before the first hearing. Grandma had warned me he might, and I prepared for it. Mia, sweetie. His voice was different. Desperate, cajoling. This has all been a huge misunderstanding. You know I would never. You left me at a train station, I interrupted, my voice steady thanks to weeks of practice with Miss Catherine. With no money, no ticket, no plan. I was coming back. I just needed to. You posted vacation photos an hour later, making memories with the ones who matter most. Silence, then his voice hardening. You have no right to ruin my life like this. You already ruined mine. I was proud of how calm I sounded. The difference is I'm going to rebuild better, without you. You ungrateful little. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I'd done it. I'd faced him down. The first court date arrived faster than expected. Grandma had bought me a new outfit, professional but age-appropriate. Nothing that could be criticized as too adult or too childish. Miss Catherine had coached me on courtroom presence. Dr. Reeves had prepared me for the emotional impact. But nothing really prepared me for walking into that courtroom and seeing my father across the aisle. He looked smaller somehow. His expensive suit couldn't hide the weight he'd lost or the dark circles under his eyes. Sharon sat behind him, her perfect makeup not quite concealing her pinched expression. She kept whispering urgently to him, and he kept shaking her off. All rise, the bailiff called, and the judge entered. Judge Martinez was a small woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper reputation. She reviewed the initial filings while the courtroom held its breath. Before we begin, she said, looking directly at my father, I want to make something very clear. The evidence I've already reviewed is deeply troubling. Abandoning a minor child at a public transportation hub without means or supervision is not just irresponsible, it's criminal. Mr. Hartley, you should be aware that depending on how these proceedings go, criminal charges may be recommended. Dad's lawyer stood quickly. Your Honor, my client maintains that this was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Judge Martinez's voice could have frozen fire. There is security footage, counselor. Clear footage of your client walking away while his 14-year-old daughter calls after him. That's not a misunderstanding. That's abandonment. The hearing proceeded with mechanical precision. Our side presented the evidence of abandonment, financial fraud, and years of neglect. Their side tried to paint me as troubled, Grandma as manipulative, the whole situation as blown out of proportion. Then came the moment I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. My turn to speak. I stood, my legs steadier than I'd expected. The courtroom fell silent. Your Honor, I began, my voice carrying clearly thanks to Miss Catherine's training. I spent 6 hours at that train station. 6 hours wondering what I'd done wrong. 6 hours watching families come and go while mine had thrown me away. I looked directly at my father for the first time. He didn't forget me. He didn't misunderstand. He made a choice. He chose money and his new family over his daughter. And now he wants to paint himself as the victim because his choice has consequences. Dad's face went red. He started to stand, but his lawyer pulled him back down. I don't want his money, I continued. I want my freedom. I want to live with someone who values me as a person, not as a future payday. I want to be able to trust that I won't be abandoned again the moment I become inconvenient. Judge Martinez nodded slowly. Thank you, Miss Hartley. I've heard enough for today. Temporary custody is granted to Mrs. Helen Hartley pending full review. Mr. Hartley, you are ordered to have no contact with your daughter except through supervised channels. Financial accounts will be frozen pending investigation of fraud allegations. The gavel came down like thunder. As we left the courthouse, Dad called out, "This isn't over. You're ruining everything, Sharon. The kids. Everyone is suffering because of your selfishness." I turned back, meeting his eyes with a steadiness I'd never had before. No, Dad. Everyone is suffering because of yours. Grandma's hand found mine warm and steady. Come, my dear. We have a future to build. Behind us, I could hear Sharon's voice shrill and accusing. This is your fault. You said she was worth millions. You said it would be easy. Their perfect family was cracking apart just like mine had. The difference was I had someone who truly loved me to help pick up the pieces. Dad had only the wreckage he'd created himself. As our car pulled away from the courthouse, protesters were already gathering. Some supported us, holding signs about children's rights and parental responsibility. Others supported him, decrying greedy relatives and family destruction. It's going to get worse before it gets better, Mr. Chin warned. Good, I said, surprising everyone, including myself. Let it get worse. Let everyone see what he really is. The storm had broken, and I was no longer afraid of the rain. The morning our story broke nationally, I woke to find Grandma in the war room, surrounded by newspapers and 3 laptop screens. Her expression was grimly satisfied. The New York Times picked it up, she said, sliding a tablet across to me. The headline read, "The Abandonment at Central Station. A father's betrayal becomes a legal reckoning." They'd interviewed other passengers from that day. Margaret, the woman who'd sat with me, had given a scathing account. That poor child was terrified. I've seen runaways at stations before. This wasn't that. This was a girl who'd been thrown away like garbage. Dad's response was swift and predictable. By noon, his lawyers had arranged a press conference on the courthouse steps. I watched from the safety of Grandma's study as he played the victim, Sharon dabbing at dry eyes beside him. My daughter has always been troubled, he said, his voice catching with practiced emotion. Mental health issues run in her mother's family. I was trying to get her help, professional help, when she ran away and my mother seized the opportunity to turn her against me. Bastard, Grandma muttered, but his performance had cracks. When a reporter asked why he'd gone to a resort immediately after, he fumbled. When another asked about the trust fund, Sharon's composure slipped, her hand tightening on his arm in warning. Then came the killing blow. A reporter from the Washington Post stood. Mr. Hartley, we've obtained credit reports showing you opened multiple cards in your daughter's name. Can you explain that? The feed cut to commercial break, but not before catching Dad's face. Panic poorly masked by indignation. Mr. Chin was ecstatic. He just admitted to attempted institutionalization without cause. That's going to play very badly in court. The court date for the full custody hearing was set for the following week. But first came the depositions. 3 days of grueling questions in a sterile conference room, with Dad's lawyers trying every angle to break me. Isn't it true you've been diagnosed with depression? Mr. Fitzgerald, Dad's lead attorney, asked. Yes, after my parents' divorce and my mother's alcoholism. It's well managed with therapy. And you've had behavioral issues at school? I had detention once for being late because my dad forgot to pick me up and I had to walk 3 miles. Every question designed to paint me as troubled, unstable, undeserving of sympathy. But Ms. Rodriguez had prepared me well. You seem very coached, Fitzgerald observed. I've learned to protect myself, I replied. Abandonment will do that. The financial investigation revealed more than even Grandma had suspected. Dad hadn't just taken credit cards in my name. He'd been siphoning from accounts grandfather had set up for my education. Small amounts he thought wouldn't be noticed, nearly $200,000 over 3 years. Federal charges, Mr. Chin said quietly. This is wire fraud. But the real shot came from an unexpected source. Connor, Sharon's 8-year-old son, had been keeping a diary on his tablet. His teacher, concerned about his recent behavior, had alerted Child Services, who'd subpoenaed it. The entries were devastating. October 3rd. Mom says we're rich now, but Mike, he refused to call him Dad, yells about money all the time. November 15th. Mike said Mia's going away forever soon. Mom smiled. I miss when it was just us. November 18th. Mike hurt Mom's arm. She said she fell. She didn't fall. Child Services opened their own investigation. Sharon's perfect family image wasn't just cracking, it was shattering. The day before the custody hearing, Dad made one last desperate play. My mother, sober for perhaps the first time in months, appeared at the gates of Grandma's estate. I want to see my daughter. She slurred slightly despite her claims of sobriety. Grandma handled it personally. I watched from an upstairs window as she met my mother at the gates. Linda, you haven't asked about Mia once in the 6 weeks since her father abandoned her. I've been getting myself together. I want custody. I'm her mother. You're an alcoholic who didn't even notice her daughter was missing for 3 days. The only reason you're here is because Richard promised you money if you help him. My mother's face went ugly. I'll tell them you're keeping her from me. Kidnapping. Try it, Grandma said coolly. I have documentation of every wine bottle, every passed out evening, every time Mia had to take care of herself because you were too drunk to parent. Leave now or I'll have you arrested for trespassing. My mother left, but not before screaming that we'd regret this and that she'd get what was hers. That night I couldn't eat. The stress of the impending hearing, of seeing both my parents trying to use me, was overwhelming. Grandma found me in the library at 2 a.m., reading grandfather's old journals. Can't sleep either, she asked, settling beside me with her own cup of tea. I found the entry from when I was born, I said, showing her the page. He wrote, Mia arrived today, perfect and innocent. I pray the world is kind to her. He loved you very much. More than my actual parents, apparently. Biology doesn't determine love, sweetheart. Real family is chosen through actions, not just blood. The custody hearing arrived with a media circus. Reporters, photographers, even protesters on both sides. Someone had made Justice for Mia t-shirts. Someone else had Family Values Matter signs with my father's picture. Inside the courtroom, the tension was suffocating. Dad had lost weight, his suit hanging loose. Sharon sat 2 rows behind him. They'd been fighting publicly enough that their united front had crumbled. Her children were notably absent. Judge Martinez called the court to order. I've reviewed extensive evidence in this case. Financial fraud, child abandonment, attempted manipulation of a minor's trust fund. Mr. Hartley, before we proceed, do you have anything to say? Dad stood, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes. Regret? Or just regret at being caught? I'm not perfect, he began. But I'm her father. Doesn't that count for something? Being a father is more than biology, Judge Martinez replied. It's showing up. It's protection. It's putting your child's needs above your own. Can you honestly say you've done any of that? The silence stretched until it snapped. Then Dad exploded. She's sitting on $10 million. $10 million. And I'm supposed to struggle while she lives like a princess? It's my father's money. My inheritance. Actually, Mr. Chin stood smoothly. It's Mia's inheritance. Your father was very clear about that. And your struggles are of your own making. Gambling debts, poor investments, living beyond your means, even with $5 million. Dad turned to me, his mask finally completely off. You ungrateful brat. I raised you. I deserve. Mr. Hartley. Judge Martinez's gavel cracked like thunder. One more outburst and you'll be held in contempt. But the damage was done. Everyone had seen the real him. The Washington Post article that ran the next morning included a photo that would haunt my father forever. His face contorted with rage, finger pointing at me while I sat quietly beside my grandmother. The headline, Unmasked Father Shows True Colors in Custody Battle. The public response was swift and brutal. His business contacts severed ties. Sharon filed for separation, citing irreconcilable differences and previously unknown financial fraud. Even his own brother, Uncle Keith, released a statement distancing himself from Richard's inexcusable actions. But Dad wasn't done fighting. Cornered animals rarely are. The call came at 3 a.m., 2 nights after the hearing. Not to my phone. He was legally barred from contacting me, but to Grandma's landline. "You poisonous old witch." His voice was slurred, drunk. "You've destroyed everything. My marriage, my reputation, my life." Grandma had it on speaker recording. "Richard, you're violating the restraining order." "I don't care about your restraining order. You turned my daughter against me. You and your money, always dangling it like a carrot, making me dance. I never made you do anything. Every choice was yours. I'll ruin you both. You think you've won? I know things about Dad's business, about where that money really came from." The line went dead. Mr. Chin immediately filed the recording with the court, adding violation of restraining order to Dad's growing list of legal troubles. But his threat wasn't empty. The next day, a sleazy tabloid ran a story, "Hartley fortune built on illegal dealings." It was nonsense, easily disproven, but Dad had given an exclusive interview full of wild accusations about money laundering and tax evasion. "He's desperate," Mr. Chin assured us. "These are the thrashings of a drowning man." The IRS and FBI briefly investigated, found nothing, and instead turned their attention to Dad's own financial crimes. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I returned to school during this period. Grandma insisted I needed normalcy. But normalcy was impossible when everyone knew my story. Some kids treated me like a celebrity, others like a victim, and a few those whose parents sided with my father, like a traitor to family values. Emma, my best friend, became my shield. "Anyone who gives you grief answers to me," she announced, and somehow, despite being 5'2", she made it stick. It was at school that I gave my first public speech about the experience. The principal had asked if I'd speak at an assembly about recognizing abuse and seeking help. Grandma left it entirely my choice. I stood before 300 students and told my truth. "Abandonment isn't always as obvious as being left at a train station," I said, my voice steadier than my hands. "Sometimes it's gradual. A parent who stops asking about your day, who forgets your birthday, who sees you as an inconvenience or worse, as a resource to be exploited. If someone is supposed to love you but makes you feel worthless, that's not love. If someone who should protect you instead puts you in danger, that's not family. You deserve better. We all deserve better." The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Later, 17 students approached the counselor about their own situations. The principal called it the most impactful assembly we've ever had. Dad heard about it, of course. Everything was public now. He showed up at the school the next day, drunk and raging, demanding to see me. The security guard, a grandfather himself, physically blocked him while calling the police. The arrest was captured on dozens of student phones. By evening, #Dad of the Year was trending, with a video viral across all platforms. Sharon, meanwhile, was fighting her own battles. The separation had turned ugly when she discovered Dad had hidden assets, money he'd stolen from me that he'd squirreled away in offshore accounts. She wanted her share of the fraudulent gains. "Let them tear each other apart," Grandma said, watching the news coverage of their court battle. But Connor and Brittany were collateral damage. Sharon, consumed with rage and greed, had become negligent. Child Services removed them from her care, placing them with Sharon's sister in another state. Connor's diary entry about Dad hurting Sharon had opened an investigation that revealed a pattern of domestic violence. I felt sorry for them. They hadn't asked for any of this. "You could reach out," Dr. Reeves suggested during therapy. "Let them know they're not alone." I wrote them each a letter. Simple, kind, explaining that none of this was their fault. That sometimes adults make terrible choices, but kids shouldn't blame themselves. Brittany never responded, but Connor sent back a drawing of a train station with a girl walking away from it, strong and unafraid. I still have it. The criminal trial was set. Dad faced charges of fraud, identity theft, child abandonment, and violating a restraining order. The federal charges alone carried up to 20 years in prison. He tried one last manipulation. A suicide attempt, or rather a gesture designed to look like one. He took just enough pills to require hospitalization, but not enough to cause real damage. The timing was suspicious, right before a crucial hearing. Some people felt sympathy. I didn't. "It's another manipulation," I told Dr. Reeves. "He's not sorry for what he did. He's sorry he got caught." "That's a very mature understanding," he replied. "Also a very painful one." The prosecutor, Ms. Davies, was a force of nature. She'd taken the case personally after watching the train station footage. I have a daughter your age, she told me. What he did. There's no excuse, no justification. We're going to ensure he can never hurt you again. The trial was set for 3 weeks out. Dad's lawyers pushed for a plea deal, but Ms. Davies refused anything less than admission of guilt and serious prison time. The criminal trial began on a Thursday morning that felt like the edge of the world. I wore the navy dress Grandma had bought me. Professional, respectful, but not trying too hard. My hands shook as I fastened the buttons. You don't have to go, Grandma reminded me. You've already given your deposition. I need to see this through. The courthouse was a zoo. Media from around the country, true crime podcasters, even a documentary crew that had been following the case. But also supporters. Dozens of people wearing those Justice for Mia shirts. Many of them parents who'd been horrified by my story. Dad looked diminished in his orange jumpsuit. No expensive suit to hide behind, no Sharon to perform for. Just him, his public defender, his money long gone to pay debts, and the weight of evidence against him. Ms. Davies opened with the security footage. The courtroom watched in silence as 14-year-old me called after my father, as I sat alone hour after hour, as I finally broke down crying on that cold bench. Several jurors wiped their eyes. This is not a case about money, Ms. Davies said. This is about a father who viewed his daughter not as a child to protect, but as an asset to exploit. When he couldn't access her inheritance legally, he abandoned her like a broken toy. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showing systematic theft. Text messages where he discussed getting rid of the burden with Sharon. The credit cards in my name with charges for Sharon's jewelry and their vacation. The one they took while I sat abandoned. Then came my testimony. I took the stand on day 2. Dad wouldn't look at me, keeping his eyes fixed on the table. Can you tell us about November 18th? Ms. Davies asked gently. I told them everything. The silent car ride, the confusion, the moment I saw Sharon and her kids and understood I was being discarded. The hunger, the fear, the kind stranger who bought me food. The relief when I heard Grandma's voice. Were you afraid? Ms. Davies asked. I was terrified. I thought I might die. That no one would know what happened to me. Did your father ever contact you to see if you were safe? No. He posted vacation photos instead. Dad's lawyer tried to paint me as a troubled teen, but it fell flat. Every accusation was refuted with documentation. My grades were good. My teachers praised me. My only trouble was having him as a father. The star witness, surprisingly, was Sharon. She'd made a deal for immunity in exchange for testimony, and she buried him. He said she was worth $10 million, she testified, not even pretending remorse. That once he had control of it, we'd be set for life. The abandonment was planned weeks in advance. He wanted her either institutionalized or so traumatized she'd be easy to control when she turned 18. The courtroom erupted. Judge Coleman had to threaten clearing the gallery. And you went along with this? Ms. Davies pressed. I thought he was taking her to a boarding school. I didn't know he was just going to leave her. It was a lie. We had text messages proving she knew. But her testimony was damning enough. Dad finally took the stand on day 4. His lawyer had advised against it, but his ego demanded he tell his side. It was a disaster. She owes me, he said at one point. I raised her. I paid for everything. With money you stole from her trust, Ms. Davies interrupted. That money should have been mine. I'm the son. I built that company with my father. You were 12 when your father founded the company. What exactly did you build? He spiraled from there. Blamed Grandma, me, Sharon, everyone but himself. When shown the train station footage, he actually said, "She looks fine. I don't see what the big deal is." A juror audibly gasped. The verdict took 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The sentencing was scheduled for the following month. The maximum was 25 years. The minimum was 8. In those weeks between verdict and sentencing, Dad tried everything. He wrote letters to me through his lawyer blocked. He gave a jailhouse interview claiming innocence. It only made things worse when he accidentally admitted to crimes they hadn't even charged him with. He had his brother try to negotiate with Grandma. She refused to even take the call. The day of sentencing, I gave a victim impact statement. I'd written it 17 times, each draft angrier than the last, until finally I found the words that were true. You were supposed to protect me, I said, looking directly at him for the last time. That's the most basic job of a parent. Keep your child safe. You didn't just fail at that. You were the danger I needed protection from. I spent years wondering what I did wrong. Why I wasn't good enough, why you couldn't love me the way you loved Sharon's kids. But I understand now. You never loved any of us. You only love yourself. I'm not asking for the maximum sentence because I want revenge. I'm asking for it because somewhere out there is another 14-year-old girl with a father who sees her as a resource instead of a daughter. And maybe if he sees what happened to you, he'll think twice. You abandoned me at that train station, but you set me free. I found a real family, real love, real support. I'm going to college next year, early admission to Yale. I'm going to study law to help kids like me. I'm going to take grandfather's name. Mia Blackwood, not Hartley. You thought you were throwing me away, but you just revealed who you really are. And now everyone knows. Dad tried to speak, to respond, but Judge Coleman cut him off. Mr. Hartley, I've overseen many cases in my career, but rarely have I seen such calculated cruelty toward a child. You abandoned your daughter in pursuit of money that was never yours. You stole her identity, her security, and tried to steal her future. I sentence you to 18 years in federal prison, with no possibility of early release for the first 10. Upon release, you will have no contact with your daughter unless she initiates it. All stolen funds will be returned with interest. The gavel came down for the final time. As they led Dad away, he turned back once. Our eyes met across the courtroom. I expected to feel something. Sadness, maybe even pity, but I felt nothing. He was a stranger who happened to share my DNA. Outside the courthouse, the crowd cheered. Reporters shouted questions, but I only had eyes for Grandma, standing by the car, tears streaming down her face. Proud of you, she whispered as she hugged me. Your grandfather would be too. Sharon disappeared after the trial. Rumors saying she'd left the country. Her kids were adopted by their aunt and uncle, who seemed like good people. I kept in touch with Connor, who grew into a kind young man despite everything. My mother got sober, actually sober after the trial. We have coffee sometimes. It's not a relationship exactly, but it's not nothing either. She knows she lost the right to be my parent, but maybe she can be a person in my life. The trust fund became mine on my 18th birthday, but I barely touched it. Grandma had taught me that money was a tool, not a goal. I used some for college, some for therapy, some to start a foundation for abandoned children. The rest waits, growing, ready for when I know exactly what to build with it. I returned to the train station on a November afternoon. Exactly 5 years after that horrible day. Not the same bench. They'd replaced them all with newer, supposedly more comfortable ones, but the same spot. I wasn't alone. Connor sat beside me, now 13 himself. He'd asked to see where it happened, to understand the story that had reshaped both our lives. Were you really here for 6 hours? He asked. 6 hours and 14 minutes. I know because I watched every minute tick by on that clock. I pointed to the old clock tower, still keeping perfect time. I'm sorry my mom was part of it, he said quietly. You're not responsible for your parents' choices. Trust me, I learned that the hard way. We sat in comfortable silence, watching travelers rush past, families reuniting, others saying goodbye. Normal people living normal lives. Mia, Connor asked, do you ever wonder what would have happened if he'd come back? If he'd changed his mind? I thought about it. Really thought about it for the first time in years. I would have gone with him, I admitted. I was so desperate for him to love me, I would have forgiven anything. And that would have been the real tragedy. Spending my whole life begging for love from someone incapable of giving it. My phone buzzed. A text from Grandma. Dinner at 7. Made your favorite. Home. Real home with someone who chose me not for what I was worth, but for who I was. Come on, I told Connor, standing and shouldering my bag. A designer one now, a gift from Grandma, though I still had that old worn one in my closet as a reminder. Let's go home. As we walked toward the exit, I glanced back once at that bench. The girl who'd sat there, terrified, abandoned, alone. She was part of me, but not all of me. She was the cocoon I'd emerged from, stronger and more myself than I ever could have been if Dad had been the father I'd needed. He was right about one thing that day at the station. I was old enough to figure it out. And I did. If someone who was supposed to protect you chose money over your well-being, would you find the strength to rebuild without them? Thanks for watching. Take care. Good luck.